You know, it's funny how Lara Croft is a name that never gets brought up in discussions among the Super Smash Bros. Community. Is it a character that many fans might not want? Absolutely. However, when you are a company and have an opportunity to work with Nintendo to include a character into a product, it just makes sense to include a character that the most people would know of. On Nintendo's side, it also makes sense to choose a character that guarantees that the most people who weren't interested in Smash Bros. Before would become interested because of that character. Here is the whole point of why Nintendo allows third-party characters in their product. They allow them so that they can attract new fans. Sonic the Hedgehog, Mega Man, Pac-Man, the Belmonts, Ryu, Solid Snake, Cloud, that all have huge fan bases from around the world, with some fans who likely weren't interested in Super Smash Bros. Before. You might think that a fan would not buy a whole console and a game for just a DLC character, but this is not just any game. How many people do you think would pass up the opportunity to play in an officially licensed product where you can play as Ryu and fight against Super Mario, Donkey Kong, Pikachu, and many more? I understand that Tomb Raider fans aren't interested in Smash Bros., but that's exactly the point. They wouldn't be interested until somebody who they are very familiar with is. Before I continue, here are 7 important facts about the Tomb Raider franchise. 1. Tomb Raider sold 67 million copies as a series as of this writing. By comparison to other third-party series featured in Smash Bros., Tomb Raider has outsold all but 2. Only Final Fantasy and Sonic are series that outsell Tomb Raider. That right there shows that Tomb Raider is a huge IP. 2. There is the list I have of all the best-selling Square Enix games, but it has yet to be updated, so the figures what the Tomb Raider sales will not match up with what Square Enix's press releases say. Final Fantasy VII is the best-selling Square game ever with over 13 million copies sold. Not far behind is the 2013 reboot of Tomb Raider, with over 11 million copies sold. The rest of the top 10 list consists of 6 other Final Fantasy games and 2 other Tomb Raider games. So you know right here that Tomb Raider is a very valuable and successful franchise, now more than ever, since Square Enix is responsible for making the first rebooted game beat the best-selling older Tomb Raider game in lifetime sales. 3. A lot of people tend to discredit Tomb Raider that they don't sell good within the first month of release. Tomb Raider, however, is not a series that people buy when it's new. It's an evergreen series. Rise of the Tomb Raider is in 13th on the list with 7 million copies sold. The first few months of sales have not met expectations, but with the timed exclusivity of the Xbox One expiring, the long-term sales have been comparable to that of mainline Zelda, Pokémon, and Mario games. 4. Before the launch of Tomb Raider, 2013, the series has sold 35 million copies. With 67 million copies sold today, that is a gigantic jump of 32 million copies in a span of just 5 years. In comparison, Castlevania has accrued a total of 20 million copies since 1986. It does seem too crazy to be true, but these are the figures that Square Enix had given out around the release of the first Tomb Raider game and with a press release that went out just recently. Could a percentage of those sales come from Steam downloads? Not out of the question at all, but that doesn't discredit the fact that people are still playing Tomb Raider games. 5. Kingdom Hearts only has sold a total of 24 million copies lifetime. Its best-selling game, the first one, has sold just under 6 million copies. There are 5 Tomb Raider games that have sold more, the first 3 and the last 2 before Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Even with global powerhouse brand Disney, it is far from Square's best-selling franchise. You can make the argument that Kingdom Hearts hasn't had that many games out, and it's been over 10 years since Kingdom Hearts 2, that I can understand, but they have been releasing smaller games and spin-off games in the meantime. 6. Tomb Raider is Square's highest-grossing movie franchise, with $640 million made across 3 movies. Second is Final Fantasy with $340 million made across 3 movies. People say, well, who cares about movies? And I say, it's important to bring up because the reason why they made 3 Tomb Raider movies is because they appeal to people who play the games, and it also introduces new fans to the series in which they would buy the games. All three movies have pulled in great box offices, so at this point, especially with the two movies starring Angelina Jolie, you'd have to be living under a rock to not acknowledge the success that Tomb Raider has had. 7. To no one's shock, Lara Croft is one of gaming's most recognizable characters, and is on lists of most memorable video game and fictional characters published by Time, Empire, and Entertainment Weekly. She also owns a handful of Guinness World Records, such as most recognizable female video game character and video game character with the most magazine covers. There have also been several unique Guinness World Records created, such as largest Tomb Raider memorabilia collection and largest gathering of people dressed as Lara Croft. She is what is called an icon in video games, and Nintendo has been touting this game as the ultimate game of icons. You mean to tell me that a character who has a handful of world records under her belt would be overlooked in favor of a character co-created by Disney, or a character that only appeared in one Mario game? I understand the demand for Geno and Sora. I don't deny that people want these characters and they mean a lot to them. And you are totally not wrong to want the characters you like. If you say that you predict one of these characters, not want, but predict these characters, I can't help but point out to me why they are not likely. Practically the only argument that I receive about why these characters are likely is because, quote, it's who the fans demanded, and that this is a fan service game. Well, I can already point out that that's not entirely true. If it were really a fan service game, then all of those characters that I listed would have been playable. The only two exceptions are King K. Rool and Ridley, because 1, they are from series that are still relevant, and 2, they are large, heavyweight characters, especially K. Rool, that the roster needed in order to be more balanced. Before these two characters, Bowser, DK and King Dedede were the only fighters that were big and heavy. Yes, I've wanted King K. Rool all this time, and yet it doesn't seem like it was because of fan demand. This is not an election, so I don't understand why people treat it like one. But let's get back to Geno and Sora, and why they are not considered, in my view, the best choice for Square Enix to pick to be in the product. For Geno, he has no IP of his own. There are no games he appears in, not named Mario, that you can buy. Furthermore, it has been over 20 years since Super Mario RPG. It doesn't seem likely that Square is interested in using the character again in some fashion. People may argue that Geno can be put in Smash Bros. To revive the character. Why bother? Why can't Square first be interested in creating an IP with him, and see how it goes first? If they chose Geno, it would be rather a head-scratching decision, because he is far from the most marketable of characters they own. For Sora, he's not even owned by Square Enix, but Disney. This should already disqualify him, since he's not technically a Square Enix character. He has more to do with Disney than Square Enix, and for him to be chosen says less about Square Enix as a company full of valuable IP and more about Disney as the corporate global giant that they are. Secondly, Square Enix would make little to no money from using the character, so it just makes better sense to use a character they 100% own so that they actually make money. The CEO of Disney in Japan said, sure, they can use Sora, but I mean, of course. 1, who wouldn't want their character in Smash Bros, and 2, they would be the ones benefiting from it. Is Disney not big enough as is? We got Dragon Quest, and there actually is an advantage that it has over Tomb Raider. It has sold 76 million copies worldwide compared to Tomb Raider's 67 million. It is also a more popular series in Japan. That isn't to say that Tomb Raider is not relevant in Japan, but Dragon Quest is more popular there without a doubt. Here are two problems that I see with a Dragon Quest inclusion, though. The first one is that there is no real icon to represent the franchise. As the most recognizable character in the series, there's the slime. There are several videos floating around about how this lamb can work as a character, but it really doesn't demonstrate what it would be like playing a Dragon Quest game, since the character you would be picking is an enemy and that enemy has a move set that is beyond what one of those enemies is actually capable of. There are some clever ideas though. There is also another idea floating around that you would have 8 different Dragon Quest heroes as different skins, like Bowser Jr. However, I don't see that working too well. They wouldn't feel like unique characters if you have 8 characters all animating the same way. Secondly, Dragon Quest is another RPG from Square Enix. Before they bought out Eidos, their entire portfolio was nothing but RPG franchises. In Smash Bros., you are already representing your biggest RPG, then the concern there would be how different would the Dragon Quest fanbase be from Final Fantasies. If you are a Dragon Quest fan, but you have already become a Smash Bros. Customer because Cloud is in the game, then you wouldn't be considered a new fan. Having a character in the game that current customers are already fond of doesn't make for new sales. Meanwhile, Tomb Raider appeals to a completely different audience entirely. If you are a Square Enix customer, but are not interested in RPG, then there's a good chance that you play Tomb Raider, Just Cause, Deus Ex, etc. Tomb Raider is not an RPG. For that matter, there are no games represented in Smash Bros. That look like this. So you're more likely to attract many more new fans by picking Lara Croft. By the same token, those Smash Bros. Fans can also look into buying Tomb Raider games. Maybe they could port some Tomb Raider games to Switch, but there are tons of games that fans can also play on mobile devices, as well as Steam. When Cloud was introduced in Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS, Final Fantasy VII was recently ported to phones and tablets. Cloud and Lara Croft, while both gaming icons, they have nothing in common, and that is a good thing. By having Lara in the game with Cloud, that would reach out to nearly 100% of Square Enix's entire fanbase. By choosing another RPG character, you would be isolating that other half, and not many more fans would come aboard the Smash Bros. Community because you already have Cloud. Because you would have Lara Croft, more people would buy the game, and they would possibly buy the Switch as well. Think of all the other crossovers in fighting games. Noctis and Negan in Tekken 7, the Ninja Turtles in Injustice 2, Gerald in Soul Calibur 6. They aren't playable characters in those games because they listen to what fans want, but rather they want more people to buy the game outside the group of fans that they already have. Because let's be real, nobody who is a Tekken fan would ever expect or ask for a character from an American TV show. This is not an all bets are off scenario. If Lara is not in Smash Bros., then that is perfectly okay. But I just made this video to point out that she has a lot of value that is just too significant for Nintendo and Square Enix to just ignore. Square Enix didn't buy Eidos just cause. They saw it as a means to grow their company, and they have done just that ever since they rebooted Tomb Raider. Sure, choose a different character. I'll still support the game and I will still buy the DLC if it grabs me, but good luck trying to reach out to as many fans as possible and making the most cash as possible with such decision. As for the Sora and Geo mobs, go ahead, downvote this video if you must. It will not change the facts or undo all the success that the Tomb Raider series has. If you get what you want, I'll be happy for you. But many people clearly overlook Lara Croft considering she's only one of the biggest characters to not yet be in Smash Bros.